When Elon Musk first launched his AI tool Grok, he called it rebellious and anti-woke. But over the summer, what that meant took a disturbing turn. The chatbot, which is embedded in Musk's social media platform X, started undressing people without their consent.
So you would post an image saying, hey, having a great holidays, and then someone would reply underneath it, hey Grok, can you put this person in a bikini? And everyone would be able to see it. You wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
Cam Wilson is a tech journalist and associate editor at Crikey. He watched this take hold as more and more people pushed Grok to the limit.
And so people on X using this AI chatbot in public were undressing people who were posting there, people were posting pictures of other people, mostly women, sometimes children as well. And this thing, while they didn't actually publicly post naked images, it was highly sexual. It was putting people in revealing clothing. It was using, putting like donut glaze on people's faces to simulate sex acts. So, everything up to the line, very sexualized, all in public, allowed on X.
Anthony Albanese has staked his legacy on keeping children safe online. So what is he doing to stop Grok? I'm Nicole Johnston, and you're listening to 7am. Today, Cam Wilson, on whether it's time for the government to get off X. It's Wednesday, January 21. Cam, we've been hearing stories over the past week or so about sexualised images of women and children being created and distributed on X. How widespread is this?
It was pretty widespread. I mean, so at its peak, we saw people saying that Grok was generating, I think, thousands upon thousands of non-consensual, generally sexualized images of people every day.
Someone replied to me and asked Grok to put me in a bikini. I feel like violated seeing it.
And so what makes this different is that, unlike these other AI chatbots where how you interact with these chatbots tends to be fairly private, this is very public. And it was just, an endless scroll of people whose images had been sexualized to either literally, sexualize them or in many cases to humiliate them as well.
These look very real, these images. And they also have real parts of my real life, like my real son's backpack in the background.
Cam, it sounds just awful. But what are the laws that are being broken, and is anything being done about it?
This is something that, when it gets to become sexual imagery, is in many cases against the law. Australia has federal laws against distributing deepfake images. But if it stops short of that, if it is just something that is sexually suggestive, it may not be against the law. And as far as I know, in Australia, there's actually no law against the kind of creation of a tool that allows you to create sexual images of someone that are deepfake. But there's also something else that was happening behind the scenes that got less attention that's really intertwined with it, which is that standalone Grok app actually goes further on the standalone app than in X, the platform. So when users download the app privately, they can actually produce sexually explicit material. I've seen plenty of examples of producing topless material, explicit pornography that's produced using this. And according to some reports, there were cases of people on forums on the internet sharing what appeared to be images or videos of Grok-generated material that was sexually explicit of people who appeared to be as young as 11, 12, 13 years old. That is unambiguously against the law in pretty much every country around the world. In Australia, we actually have online safety regulations under the Online Safety Act that set requirements for providers of major online platforms, such as X, such as Grok, to set safeguards to prevent the distribution and also production of child sexual exploitation material using their products. So breaking that can, in the first place, if it's kind of taken to court, it can end up with a fine of up to close to $10 million. And if you do it repeatedly, you can even have your app legally forced to shut down or to be removed from the app stores in Australia. I went to the e-Safety Commissioner and they told me that they had received multiple complaints of image-based abuse that alleged that Grok was used in it. And so as a result, the e-Safety Commissioner has actually written to X.
And so how much power does the e-Safety Commissioner really have to crack down on this and to try and stop it from happening?
So the e-safety commissioner is a role that has existed now for a bit more than a decade. And it started out as this children's e-safety commissioner, and it was mostly focusing on things like children being abused online, cyber abuse. Since then, the role has grown a lot, and one of the landmark parts of its development is the introduction of the Online Safety Act at the start of this decade. They gave it a variety of new powers, including the industry codes and standards. And then they say, you need to come up with basic guidelines that you think are needed to use your product safely. You're going to write those, and then you're going to propose them to me, the safety commissioner. And if I think they're acceptable, then I'll approve them and they'll become enforceable. If I don't think they're acceptable, then I'll give you another chance to rewrite them. And otherwise, I might write them. There is this kind of explicit requirement at the moment to stop your products from being used to disseminate or to produce child sexual exploitation material. I think in this example, where Grok has clearly been producing sexualized images of young people and reportedly has been producing sexually explicit images of young people, I think this is one of those examples where X and Grok have clearly broken the law. It's pretty clear that there is potential damage being done against people, potentially Australians, that really need to be counteracted by a response from Australia. And so, yes, like writing to X is a good first step to say, hey, how are you abiding by these rules? As part of what I imagine will be an investigation into whether they actually are explicitly abiding by them. I'd like to see that sped up because, the damage is happening now.
And Cam, you have already touched on this a little bit, but could you tell us more about the response that Australia and other countries are getting from Elon Musk about X and Grok?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, Elon Musk kind of just ignored it.
And then he said, obviously, Grok does not spontaneously generate images. It does so only according to user requests. When asked to generate images, it will refuse to produce anything illegal.
He is someone who says he is about free speech. I think we've seen in some of his other behaviours that maybe that's not a full commitment, but certainly he doesn't like any government to tell him how to act and how his technologies can operate.
Now the governments of Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines have banned the chatbot altogether. Britain and Canada have launched probes into Grok, and the possibility of tougher penalties for Musk are on the table.
But because there was an enormous widespread response from this, the company that owns the social media platform and the AI had limited some of its abilities to do some of these things, but according to reporting, not really stopped it. So I'm fascinated to see what regulators will find out and what they'll do around the world.
Coming up, should the Australian government stop giving money to X? Cam, in the years since Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it into X, it's really changed. And some news organisations, certain government departments, they've actually stopped using it and say that they're worried about misinformation. So how has its user base actually changed?
Well, I mean, one thing that I think isn't noticed enough is that its user base has significantly reduced. In fact, there was some data that came out yesterday suggesting that X's daily users on mobile in the US had halved over the last year. I think it's also telling the kinds of people who remain on the platform. I mean, I think it has largely become very popular among the right and the kind of far right, which was welcomed back with open arms. I reported when Elon Musk took over, he overturned some of the bans. We saw neo-Nazis, Australian neo-Nazis, flock back to the platform. We've seen people who were banned for all kinds of terrible behaviour come back on the platform. So the fact that there's all of these, world leaders on their Australian departments remaining on there on a platform that increasingly is populated by a smaller group of people who are kind of, from what I see, being almost a little bit radicalized, or at least putting up in many cases with some really terrible stuff. It really boggles the mind. And this step where right in front of them, this platform was being used to create and distribute these awful images of people really was personally a breaking point for me. I was how can you be Anthony Albanese, who I noticed exclusively announced his response to what was happening in Venezuela on X, not on his website, not on Facebook, exclusively on there. And it's wedged between pictures of people who are being put in micro bikinis or whatever against their will.
And Cam, not only is the federal government still using X, they're also using it to promote their work and for advertising as well. Do you know how much they're spending on advertising there?
Yeah, so they continue to advertise on there as far as I know. The last full number was, I think, close to $3 million a year. And I think that was the full year after Elon Musk took over. So that was 2023. We know, for example, as recently as last year, the Treasury was still on there and advertising on there. So we know that it kind of continues. And that's one of the things, even if you accept that there's a platform that, you need to be on as a world leader to kind of disseminate information, it's different to be also materially propping up this company by supporting it. The government has spent the last 18 months telling us that the safety of young people is the utmost thing, that they have also, introduced federal anti-deepfake legislation, and they say that they abhor what is happening on these platforms and they remain on it. So the fact where, the teen social media ban, as I know, is followed by reporting is one of those things that I think, the evidence is a little bit less clear on. I don't think there is anyone in the general public who opposes stopping the production of non-consensual sexualized images of people. It's unambiguous, and yet the government remains, not only literally supporting it in terms of the advertising, but also literally supporting it in terms of putting its content on there, so it's a place that people have to remain. So, I think the government and Anthony Albanese's office gave me a statement being like, we care deeply about this reaction on people's online safety. I think that their words are very different to their actions here.
Cam, it's been great speaking with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Also in the news, the Commonwealth Remuneration Tribunal has tightened the rules for politicians' travel after last year's expenses saga. It follows criticism of taxpayer-funded trips claimed by ministers including Annika Wells, Don Farrell and Michelle Rowland to take their families with them to events like the Australian Open and major NRL and AFL matches. The tribunal recommends family reunion travel be economy class and that extra spending for ministers and other senior office holders be wound back. And New South Wales has extended protest restrictions in parts of Sydney for another 2 weeks. The laws were enacted following the Bondi massacre, initially allowing the state's police commissioner to ban protests for the fortnight following the mass shooting. However, the commissioner noted that January 26 marches, including the Invasion Day March, could go ahead, as the restricted area would not include the protest's usual congregation point of Hyde Park. I'm Nicole Johnston. This is 7am. Catch you later.